Hi there. Welcome back to another video on my channel. Today, I thought we would dip our toes into book drama yet again. I don't know why these videos do well. I mean, I know why these videos do well every time I make them, and that's what encourages me to make them. I'm the kind of person that, I typically don't react to things right away. I like to take my time. I like to see a couple other videos of other people's opinions and see how they feel, and then like wait for some articles to come out, and then maybe read an article or two about the situation, and then like come up with my own thoughts about it. So that's what we've done today. This is yet another video of me bringing you cold tea. I've tried to bring you hot tea before, and some of y'all did not like that. So here I am with the cold tea yet again. By the time this video goes up, it probably would have been a while since this like incident was initially like not incident, but since this topic has been brought up on like book threads and book talk and stuff. But that's okay. I'm here and I'm here to talk about it with you. Today I wanted to talk about Luke Bateman and his recent book deal that he got signed onto with the Simon and Schuster, with like a baby company of Simon and Schuster Australia, and why people are being really upset about it. I thought maybe some of you might find this interesting because I myself am an author and I'm an independent author. A lot of the people I see reacting to this are readers, and I just wanted to give my perspective as somebody who operates in the industry and in some vague sort of way. So if you're interested in that and you're interested in my opinions on the situation, just keep on watching. Okay, so let's talk about who Luke Bateman is first. Luke Bateman is a former athlete. He played rugby in Australia professionally for a couple years until 2019 when he had a knee injury that kind of took him out of the game. Since then, he has kind of also made a name for himself by appearing on reality TV. In December of 2023, he was one of the three hopefuls in the final season of The Bachelor, where he ended up with the contestant Ellie Rolfe, but they split up because a lot of reality TV couples tend to do that post reality TV show hookups, right? He is a 30-year-old now tree logger from Queensland, and just recently he decided to make a TikTok account that's part of book talk where he talks about his like love for fantasy books. I have an article pulled up in front of me, and it just has some stats that I might be referring to. Within days of Luke Bateman starting an account to share his thoughts on his fantasy books, he amassed more than 136,000 followers. He is now at 178,000. This article is from June 4th, which I believe is that today? It's from June 4th. So if there's more to that, then my bad. But that is what this article claims at this point in time. Yes, it is June 4th. Oh my god. So he got on TikTok talking about his fantasy books, and he seems to be a very passionate reader within the genre. And I saw one TikTok he posted that was like ranking his favorite fantasy books, and you can tell that he's like really passionate about those books in particular. Oh, something I also wanted to put out that this article quoted that made me kind of sad. I'm just going to read you the paragraph and then tell you why it made me a little sad. On April 22, Bateman posted his first TikTok setting himself up as a book lover who wanted to chat about his favorite genre of fantasy, and in particular, romantasy. I love fantasy, but I've never had anywhere to talk about it or share those things because obviously being male, dot, 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 from the country, he told his followers. That last little caveat makes me a little sad. I think I talked about this in a video I made a couple weeks ago that had a lot of mixed reactions and like people coming out of nowhere to give their opinion on something that have never been on my channel before. So that was really interesting to experience that for the first time. Hey, but anyway, yes, I think there is a stigma for some reason nowadays of this idea of being a big macho man, and that big macho man can't read books, which is obviously not true. I think a lot of toxic masculinity demonizes education for reasons I mentioned in my previous video, but I'll reiterate them again. Because more women are pursuing degrees, pursuing education, and going after jobs that are traditionally dominated by men, sometimes people who have this toxic masculinity type mindset will see that and see like an entire type of work be feminized and then no longer have interest in it. this is an example of the patriarchy hurting men just as much as women, because now men are decentivized to get education or to become literate, I guess. I don't know. I also blame shit from the 80s for this, because I was at my mom's this weekend. I was watching some like material from the 80s, and like toxic masculinity, the house, right? But like it's the same idea of like big burly bully guy beating up shy quiet nerdy guy who likes to read, right? Like I don't think this is anything new. I just think it's like done on such a big scale, and it's really sad if somebody like this guy like wants to talk about books and share his love of books, but he doesn't want to be othered in some kind of way. I don't know, like I feel bad, but at the same time it's hard because like I'm married to somebody who is a man and like is so secure in his masculinity, and he's always been kind of nerdy, and Douglas reads a lot of sci-fi and stuff like that, so like he's never really let those negative examples of masculinity get in the way of things he wants to do. I recognize that's a journey that's difficult for everybody to push back against gender norms in some sort of way, or I guess, or societal expectations. But yeah, that part made me a little sad, and like obviously that's a huge mixed bag of like why this individual would feel that way, especially if he grew up in like an athletic, like hyper masculine culture like rugby. Like I don't know about rugby. My experience with rugby has been with like female rugby players, because when I was in college, like I was pretty much friends with the entire female rugby team and they wanted me to play rugby, but I was like, no thanks, because I don't want to get tackled. So my perspective of rugby is through a queer woman's lens. Like, so I don't know about male rugby. I don't know what goes on there. I would just assume it's like American football, but if I'm wrong, let me know like in the comments down below. But anyway, growing up in this like what I assume to be a more conservative, like masculine culture and having those gender expectations is sad. And so if he wants to reach out on Book Talk and talk about his love of fantasy, that's great. I do think we should point out, like with the romanticy stuff, I think this article is a little deceptive, because when I was listening to other people's videos on this topic, it made it seem like he was talking about traditional, like epic high fantasy at first, which is very popular amongst young men. Like again, my husband like, reads that. He loves high fantasy or like complex sci-fi novels, right? So that is very common among men. But then you know how the Book Talk girlies be doing it. A lot of them saw this man and automatically started recommending him, you know, romanticy content, which is like A Court of Thorn and Roses and the like, you know what I mean, and Fourth Wing and like stuff like that. I think they did this, and then I also saw like people highlighting the fact that these women were really thirsting after this guy. Which again, he is a conventionally attractive man. I've been putting pictures on here, and I've put his picture in the thumbnail for you to see. I think this is a conventionally attractive young man. He's not really my type per se, because again, I've mentioned before how my husband's a nerdy man. That's kind of what I gravitate towards. I like the funny nerdy people. That's what I like. But again, he's a conventionally attractive young man. Like this is my mom's type to a T. If he was like her age demographic, you know what I mean? It makes sense, especially since like he does come from that professional athlete background. A lot of the Book Talk girlies, when they read their romances, they do the hockey romances, and I'm sure there's a rugby subgenre of that somewhere. So Book Talk has a history of finding certain men that fits their profiles for the type of content they like the motorcycle guys, the masked guys. There was like a year or two ago where people were like, unfortunately, like thirsting after this like serial killer guy because he fits their dark romantic fantasies. That could be a video in its whole self. Like that could be a video by itself. And I'm not going to address that here about like the ethics of that. But anyway, so people were thirsting after this guy, conventionally attractive young man. He knows he's conventionally attractive. He went on The Bachelor. He knows. He did reality TV. He knows this. Okay. But anyway, he's talking about fantasy. And because he has such a large female following and he knows he has a lot, he's addressed this himself. He has a large female following. He was like, yeah, I'll dip my toes into romantasy. Why not? So he read the books that they recommended and started like being like, yeah, these are good, blah, blah, blah. And people even got to the point, I guess, where they gifted him like a romantasy hat or something, or a romance reader hat, which I think is helpful. I think it's great for men to read romance novels. I think it's great for men to try this, especially straight men, especially like your conventional idea of masculinity engaging in books and things like that are primarily written for women. I think it's great to be open-minded and read things that are different. Like I applaud him for that. The controversy of this whole thing, because this is just a normal dude, right? The controversy of this thing was the fact that he, after a month of being on Book Talk, he got a 2-book deal with Simon & Schuster Australian imprint Atria. This is also compounded with the fact that it seems like he doesn't really have writing experience. He's never written a book before. One of the things is like, yes, you can be a really, really passionate reader, and maybe you want to be a writer one day. That's great. But, it's hard. It's hard to start a career in writing if you've literally never written before. And I think some of the reason why a lot of authors are offended by this is the fact that, like, when you're an artist and when you're a writer, at least for myself, like, I couldn't do anything but write. Like, I've been interested in writing since I was a child, and so I would make up my own stories or actually write things, even if they were small and short. And like, I wrote poems in high school, and I did take a break from writing in college for a bit because I was trying to focus on like my degree and getting my professional studies. But I did start a novel when I was 19 years old, which ended up being my first book, Cursed Fate. But I started that book when I was 19 years old, writing in between my shifts at the art gallery, with like waiting for people to come in. I would just sit there and write. So I, even out of my busy academic schedule, I did take time to write. Grad school, I chilled out, but then during the pandemic, I returned to writing and picked that up and did everything else, right? So everyone's writing journey looks different, but a common factor for a lot of writers is that they do take that chance on themselves, even if it's just private, right? It's a form of expression. And like, if like some people believe that if he really wanted to do this, there would have been a history of him trying to write a story instead of just thinking about it or having ideas about it. So that's a criticism that some people have. A lot of people were also assuming this because in his TikTok video that he posted that was like explaining that he got this book deal, he said something along the lines of, "I can't wait to write this book." For those of you who aren't in publishing, signing a book without a manuscript is very difficult. It's not impossible. There's some, like, because I used to query. I haven't queried in a long time, a couple years. But when I queried, you at least had to have like, a synopsis, your first chapter done, and maybe an outline or maybe something else. Every publishing house is different. There's different requirements for your initial pitch. But even after your initial pitch, like if you just submitted a chapter or two, most of the time they'll get back to you and they want the full manuscript. So that's how that process typically starts. So this is a little strange for him to not have a manuscript completed. There has been some established authors who have gotten book deals based off a concept and pitches. But again, like I said, normally they're already established. They've maybe already come out with certain books and they already have like a certain reputation. Reputation being important because we'll talk about that in this video. So yeah, according to this article, Bateman's first book will be out in early 2027, and he says it will be a coming-of-age story about a young boy battling hardships and set in a fantasy world. It's a story that he has carried with him since childhood, and now it's time to get it out of his head onto the page. Okay, again, not just one book deal, but 2 book deals. So a sequel without even anything completed for the first book. I admire somebody's passion, and I think I'm the kind of person that wants to see everybody win when it comes to writing. I don't necessarily like have any animosity towards this person, but the pitch being a coming of age story about a young boy battling hardships and it's in a fantasy world is literally the plot for most young adult fantasy, at least from like the time period I was growing up in. Like, you can make that statement and apply it to Percy Jackson or Harry Potter quite easily, or even Frodo from Lord of the Rings. So nothing about that really stands out to me. For me, that seems kind of vague. So, but I'm going to continue on and read you a little bit more details because this article did have a couple more details about like his acceptance process. So yeah, let me just get into that. Okay, so according to the article, Adria publisher Athena Barry, I'm going to mispronounce this name. I'm so sorry. His publisher, Anthea Barrymus, said the publishing house would never sign an author for fiction without seeing whether or not they can actually write first. This is a direct quote. Luke and I had a long meeting where he went over the scope of the series he was working on, detailing the magic system and the journey of the protagonist across the series. There are 2 things that, in my opinion, are most important for assessing fantasy submissions, she says. He then submitted a writing sample, a thorough chapter outline for book 1, and a synopsis for the series. In total, we had almost 10,000 words to assess his commercial and literary potential. So there's from his publisher what all he submitted. I'm going to be putting other videos in this video, or like, you know how I normally do. I have in my description the videos I watched previously to like assess things. And I remember watching one video, and she claimed though that he has already tried to pitch this book without a manuscript based on ideas, and it didn't go through. This time, obviously, it's going through because he has established that he has a devoted TikTok following. So for me, this feels like an influencer book. And several of those have been out. I mean, again, even without TikTok, they gave Shane Dawson a book deal. They had Colleen Ballinger, Shane Dawson, Jojo Siwa. Lots of celebrity people have book deals. I think even Kendall and Kylie Jenner have a fantasy series that they wrote. I don't know if it's any good. I assume it was probably ghostwritten, but like some influencers have books about themselves, especially if you market yourself to a young dedicated following, you get that. With celebrity books, Janelle Monáe, I love that. I love Janelle Monáe, like just like style wise, like her outfits are always. I have not read her sci-fi book yet, but I want to. So this isn't new, like celebrities having some sort of clout. There's also like celebrity memoirs I think are popular. Britney Spears just came out with one that seems to be really good. Again, haven't read it. Not sure if I'm ready for all that because she's had such a hard life. But Britney Spears' memoir, and then the girl from iCarly, Jenny, is it McCarthy? Is her last name? The one who played Sam from iCarly. She has a memoir that's called "I'm Glad That My Mom Died." Again, she had a bit of a rough life too, being a young starlet, or at least a Nickelodeon starlet. So those memoirs I totally get. I think they're totally valid and super interesting. Influencer books, I think a lot of people have mixed opinions on them because, again, like what writing credentials does an influencer have? And I know this person, again, like I said, is clearly passionate about fantasy. That does not equate to being a writer, and especially if you haven't practiced writing. And what I assume will happen is that there will be a lot of hand holding through this process to help them get this book deal. The reason people are pissed off about this, kind of like what I said before, is he has gotten a lot of criticism about the fact that he is a conventionally attractive white man, and that if there was anybody else who didn't fit those those categories trying to do this, they would not get the same opportunity. This is a conversation about privilege, and again, something I tried to touch on in a video a couple weeks ago that I don't think was received very well, or I said certain things and went to some people, or maybe I was too sassy in the beginning of the book and that like made people upset, or in the beginning of the video, and maybe that made people upset. I don't know. But there are still elements of privilege within the publishing industry. First and foremost, it is predominantly white. I've talked about this in my past videos, and again, some people don't want to hear me. Y'all just want to dance. But as a white person, I think it's important for me to remind y'all that publishing is still predominantly white. I mentioned in my last book how there is a lot more female authorship now and female representation, like working as agents or editors or whatever in the publishing space, but the tastemakers and the decision makers are in like the executive positions are still predominantly male. So when we look at these statistics and we see that since 2020, I don't know if I mentioned in my video, but this has been since 2020 that women have been more represented in the publishing industry than men by certain margins. Prior to that, no. 2020, yes, onward. They're still not technically in the highest, most leadership positions. So that is also like important to note. And like I said, that's probably for a lot of mixed reasons. But again, it's good. It's good that we're getting diverse voices out, and I appreciate that. But there's still intersectionality and layers of privilege, like publishing becoming predominantly white. I think it's important to remember that publishing isn't always a meritocracy. In this case, yeah, somebody got a 2-book deal without having a finished manuscript. That's kind of wild, especially if they're a debut author. And yeah, he got popular on TikTok because he's a conventionally attractive man, and like he also knows this. He went on The Bachelor, and he's well aware that he has to know that he would fit a certain like beauty standard, right? And again, he's an influencer. That's kind of the name of the game for a lot of influencers. A lot of influencers that are successful are conventionally attractive. I don't know, but it does not hurt to look good on camera when you are a creative. Like there's an entire song, Video Killed the Radio Star, for about this specific thing. So yeah, a lot of people have called out pretty privileged for him getting this sort of opportunity. Also his racial and gender identity for this as well. He made a follow-up apology video that's not mentioned in this article conveniently. that if I can find, I'll put on screen. If I can't, I'll put a screenshot up here. But in his apology video, he said something that a lot of people disagreed with. He said that there's no barrier to reading and writing, claiming that, like, anybody can do this. So, like, that negates, I guess, people's criticism of his privilege, saying that, like, if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. That isn't necessarily true. I think I don't know what the world is like in Australia because I've never been there, but there are definitely socioeconomic barriers to literacy. Something I've talked about in this channel a little bit before, but like if you live in an area that does not value education, you are less likely to pursue it. If you have parents that don't see the value of reading to you as a child, then that's going to hinder your mental development and put you at a disadvantage growing up, like, in general. Like, I was so blessed that my mom was a champion of literacy in our household. Like, I was constantly read to. She was a librarian for a short amount of time, and that was always something that was kind of like not forced on me because I liked it. But even with my siblings, they weren't big readers, and they're still not big readers right now. At least I don't think so. But she still actively made that, like, effort to try to keep books in the house constantly and have us read. Not everyone has parents like that, and sometimes, even though, like, parents may want to do that, they might not have the time to sit down and read with their child because they might be working like 3 jobs, right? Or they don't have anyone around the house to help them with that. They don't have the energy to sit and read and teach, because also, not just parents, but like school funding, right? Like, if you live in an area that has a school that's not well funded and doesn't have like a well stocked library, then what are you supposed to do? Like, how are you supposed to go out and find books? If you live in rural America, there's a whole reason Dolly Parton started a charity to help with literacy rates in like rural parts of like Tennessee, right? Like, she sends people books, like children's books, to help out with that. So if this wasn't a problem, why would people make such a conscious effort to try to fight against literacy to sorry, I'm turning my brain back on. Why wouldn't people make a constant effort to try to boost literacy rates amongst children? Not only that, there's like active book banning going on in the United States. So that's also something to be mindful of too. Like, if you live in a state that is trying to ban certain stories from being published, you do not have, or certain stories from being on shelves or being accessible to young folks, you will not have access to that book anymore if it was being torn away from shelves, right? So that's why a lot of people are developing their own personal collections right now with books, especially with like banned books, because with the way this country's going, who knows, right? And who knows? So yeah, if you're like a kid in Florida or wherever, or even Texas, I saw a clip of Texas having passing or proposing more restrictive book banning things. So if you live in one of those states, like, you're not going to have access to the same kinds of books that if you lived in a state like, I don't know, like Illinois. Or Boston or Massachusetts or something like that. There are barriers to reading and writing. If your parents aren't educated, that decreases your likelihood of receiving an education. It's not impossible, sure, but it does make things harder for folks. So yeah, that rubbed people the wrong way because then it almost felt like he was doubling down on said privilege by saying something like that. Again, I will link the video that talked about that here, and if I can find the screenshot, I will put it here. I just wanted to kind of like give my final thoughts on that. So I presented you with all this information, and like I said, I don't think this person is necessarily a bad person. I just think that they got the book deal of a lifetime and they should be thankful for it. I've been publishing independently for a hot minute now, so I'm kind of like in my own world vibing. I'm like, woohoo, great. And again, we don't write in the same genre, so maybe I'm not as personally affected by this, but I can see how other people might be. And yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating for sure. But again, this is just in my head another instance of an influencer book. We could talk about the merit of influencer books if you want to in a different video. Like, I can make a whole video about that and whether influencer books bring anything to the table. But I feel like this is just like a mixed bag because this is somebody who wants to be taken seriously as an author and not just like an influencer book. You know what I mean? Like, Gabby Hanna had her poetry books and she definitely wanted to be taken seriously. But at the end of the day, she couldn't really burst out of that influencer bubble. And like, this guy's relatively new on TikTok and blowing up. So maybe he's just looking to pivot, into writing and having that as a professional career. I don't know. My hope for this is that we're all really pleasantly surprised and his books are very, very good, and then he can move on from this. I don't have any ill will towards this person personally. I can see where other people are upset by this, and I think there's truth in what they're saying about his criticisms about, yes, this is a conventionally attractive, good-looking man from Australia, and he got popular because of that, and they're probably writing on that to make sure his books get popular as well. And again, being pretty doesn't hurt when it comes to marketability. That's just kind of like the way of the world, and it sucks, and I feel bad for people who can't take advantage of that. And I don't know. This video is kind of just me rambling, but I just wanted to give like a more like, I don't know. I just wanted to give some nuance to the situation. I didn't want to like see this and dogpile on somebody right away. But like I said, I think the criticisms myself personally are pretty valid. Again, normally you still have to have a manuscript completed if you're a debut author, and he bypassed that right away. And he made efforts to try to pitch based off of just ideas in the past anyway. So, like I said, people who write will write, regardless if people read it or not. And I think for me, that's just kind of an indicator. Maybe he's just ignorant. He doesn't know, because a lot of people don't understand what it takes to actually go query and try to get traditionally published. Like, a lot of people don't know the inner workings of that. So if he didn't know, then yeah. But if he did know and then still didn't make a conscious effort to write in his spare time, I don't know. Like I said, I've already said my opinions about this, about how I think this is going to be a lot of hand holding in this project, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm pleasantly surprised, and I hope all of us, all the people who are giving him criticisms, are pleasantly wrong, and then that's the best case scenario. If not, then oops. This is just another example of publishing being a business, and first and foremost being a business, and then investing into people who they think can sell books, not necessarily whether or not they want to invest in people who can write books. Anywho's, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, comment down below, share this video with a friend, or subscribe to my channel. Please, please, please. That would help me out a lot. And until next time, thanks. Bye.